The knight on e3 covers all the key squares, and if black has to play a move like bishop back to e6, um, then white's got time to swing the rooks around to the g file and swap off the rooks, and white's more than happy there with the extra piece. Having said that, f3 was played in the game, which looks, at least at first glance, like a fairly obvious defensive idea. Basically using the black pawn as Cole mentioned, a defensive shield. But the trouble is, as we find out, that white's really one tempo behind. If white has an extra move here, um, he can hang on, or should be able to hang on, albeit with a bit of difficulty. But it's that extra move that black always seems to be able to just hang on. So queen h4. Here Cole says a better try might have been h5 intending h4, and then the passed pawn pair becomes a formidable threat to win the game by themselves, even without considering all the piece support they'll have. However, having said that, it also does tend to, in some ways, slow down the attack. Because, okay, you're playing h4, sorry, h5, h4, then you'll have to move the bishop, then you play h3, and even if you do play h3, white can still use those black pawns essentially as defensive resources. So if you play, for example, h2 check, this is 5 or 6 moves down the track, white can maybe just sit the king on g2, or sit the king on h1 and blockade on g2, and if you play g2, then maybe you can just sit the king on h2. So there's a lot of ways that white can actually try and hang on to this position if you play the h4 and sort of the pawn storm idea. So I actually like this queen h4 idea. Obviously there's a threat of moving the bishop and then the queen coming into h2, so white has to do something about that. Queen e2 seems like the most logical. Here black plays bishop c5. Again, this idea of basically trying to get all these pieces into the attack, and it also, by pinning the knight, stops one of the potential defenders from getting across. Remember, in the other lines, the knight on e3 was really important. In this line, it's probably not so important, but it's still actually very useful as a defender, the fact that it can cover the g2 square. And now the fact that it essentially can't do that because of the pin is going to be really useful for black. Black here plays bishop takes e5. Pretty good defensive resource, but it relies on black finding the best follow-up. Cole didn't actually find the best follow-up, but still found a pretty decent one. But the point here is that the bishop, at least temporarily, helps control the h2 diagonal. In particular, it helps slow down some of these threats against the king with queen h2 and sort of pushing the g pawn, because there's a bishop takes h2 in a lot of lines. So the important thing for black to do here is to actually get the bishop out of that off that defensive line, and the way to do that is to actually play f6, a move that seems a bit counterintuitive in that you're playing this attack. You want to make sure that you're not sort of too slow with your attack, but the fact that you can now control all these key squares really overrides this the sort of intuition that you might think in terms of time. So here, white, if white plays d4, for example, black just moves the bishop and then takes on e5, so you might just play bishop even back to a7 or b4 or something like that, and the e5 bishop is trapped. So need to play something like bishop b2, then take on e3. Again, queen has to take, then you can play bishop g2, king takes, queen check, and you have this mating, well, not necessarily a mating idea, but a line where you're going to win considerable material. So something like this, where you've got 2 pieces for the queen, but you've also got this huge attack, which is really going to be very difficult to stop. So instead of that with f6, Cole played bishop takes e3 immediately, which isn't such a bad move. As Cole comments, Black's move is a fantastically subtle f6, which gets the bishop off the b8 to h2 diagonal. This would prove to be vital a few moves later, but it's extremely subtle now. Eventually, Black's attack intends to get in queen h2 check, king f1 and g2 check, and at that point the bishop will be attacking Black's queen on h2. So it'll be better for him to get off that square right now. Instead, I initiate the attack with the bishop still in place, and I give White a chance to slink away with a disadvantage, but not necessarily a losing one. So obviously Queen has to take on e3, and here we play bishop g2. Cole says here, I'm thinking of a forced win based on king takes g2, queen h2, king f1, g2 check, king e2, g1 queen, where I win his queen for my newly promoted pawn. But of course I make what he calls a quiescence error, because it's hard to visualize that many moves ahead sometimes, and didn't realize that would end up with bishop takes h2. And now White's diffused the threat and has enough material advantage to win. Hopefully when we get to that point, I'd have realized that the promotion had to be g1 equals knight check, and Black comes away with an advantage but not a decisive one. So the line he's actually talking about is king takes g2, queen h2, king f1, g2 check, king up to e2, and now if he plays the pawn up to g2 and promotes to a queen with a check from the queen on h2, White has bishop takes h2, which kind of kills everything. So he actually needs to play g1 and promote to a knight, so it's a double check. Now when when White returns to d1, he can play queen takes e5, threatening the rook on a1, rook takes b1, and then simply return the queen to h2. And it's slightly better for Black. The king's much safer, and the Black heavy pieces are superior to White's. The knight's also got potential from g1. Maybe he can go back to h3 and f2 or something like that. Maybe he can use apply some pressure to the f3 pawn. Maybe he can help sort of keep the king trapped in by controlling e2 from g1. It doesn't really need to go anywhere at all. But basically the fact that you've got the queen down on h2, you've got the rook on the open g file, you've got the other rook that can is on the semi-open d file, but can also get to the g file fairly easily, either by say a move like rook g2 followed by the d rook going to g8, or maybe even rook d6 and rook g6 or something along those lines. But Black's king's pretty safe, not a lot to worry about. White's king's the one in trouble, so it's the heavy pieces and king safety that make it an advantage for Black, even though structurally, obviously White's pawn structure is a lot better compared to sort of having the double pawns and the pawn islands that Black does have. Having said that, after bishop g2, White played the fatal error. He was very concerned about, obviously, the queen h2 check coming, and decided to play bishop takes g3, which is the losing move. Cole calmly played rook takes g2, and he comments that instead of all that, White tries to give back material that he was up, but it's all over from here. The computer likes queen takes g3 better, but to me that's stupid computer logic, where a complicated 15 move maneuver that leaves you with a double crossing advantage is better than a simple 3-move combo that leaves you with a crushing advantage. So although his point is that although queen takes g3 might technically be a bit better, rook takes g3 is perfectly fine as well. There's really not many ways for Black to escape because of the threats to f3, the threat of queen h1. All those threats combined really make it basically impossible for White to defend this position. White tries knight f1, bishop f3 check. Obviously if the knight takes the rook, then just queen takes followed by queen g2 mate. So king f2 was the move that was tried, but now I've actually got a mating combination with with rook g2. King has to take on f3 and queen g4 check. really nice finish to a really interesting game. A few little nuances in the opening and things that could be improved by both sides. Um, but again, very interesting to see the ways that attacks can be built up almost out of nothing, and ways that attacks can be defended as well. So it's a bit of both. Not a perfect game by any stretch of the imagination, but also a lot of things you can take from a game like this. So hopefully you've enjoyed that, and hopefully you've learned something. Thanks.